as a team, we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen. Believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now, I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now, I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's the team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals.
Ideas are bulletproof.
Ladies and gentlemen, strap yourselves in and get prepared for a trip down the rabbit hole tonight. Welcome to another live edition of my show. It is March 23rd, 2012. I'm your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com, and I have quite a show prepared for you. Many times you've heard me speak of the false ego. Many times you've heard me speak about things such as cymatics. You've heard me speak of the movie Cymatica. You've heard me speak about many different things in regards to ancient cults and how this is all wrapped up, including with the Law Society and everything else, all bundled up into one. And how at the base level, I say it's our fault, and people get pissed off at me. So I'm going to explain what I mean by it's our doing. I don't mean to say it's our fault and put that term of fault on everybody and have everybody have a negative outlook on things. That's not my intention. So what I decided to do with tonight's show was tear apart a few things done by Ben Stewart. He's actually a friend of mine, and he will be coming on the program. He's just touring, so right now it's kind of hard. But when he's done, I'm going to be getting him on. Anyway, Ben made a great movie. He's done 3 of them. I've got all 3 of them hosted up on different YouTube sites throughout the internet. His newest one I put up for him in full length, which is called Ungrip, which is a great movie about getting more in depth into the Law Society and understanding Black's Law Dictionary and everything else. I suggest you go watch it. Just look up Ungrip full length on YouTube, and I'm sure it'll pop up. Or just go over to the Answer to 1984 Is YouTube channel and look it up right there. It's on there. Anyway, tonight I'm going to be playing clips that I've cut out from Cymatica for you to explain what I mean about the false ego. And I've talked about this, but me explaining it in a nutshell, without having like Bruce Lipton on to talk about what I'm talking about and in reference to him, it doesn't quite have the same impact. So I would rather give the time up to Ben and to Dr. Bruce Lipton themselves, but since I don't have them on with me, I'll take clips from the movie that Ben used. He was able to explain everything, including interviews with Bruce Lipton. And I'm going to lay it out for you so maybe you understand a little better where I'm coming from when I say that we create this in reaction to fear, and that's how we are controlled by these elitists. And when I explained about fear and stuff on Sunday, on the what day was it? Let's see, today's the 23rd, so it was the 18th. And I did the show, it was the day after we had released the special podcast about the executive order, and I talked about fear and everything else. And I had gone into detail about how, somewhat as much as I could, without getting too off track, how we are kind of responsible for this mess. And it's because the elites that control us, they control us because we have this need to be controlled almost. And even if you don't realize it, it's at a subconscious level. So I didn't get too in-depth into that, okay? And I didn't want – that's a very important issue, and I didn't want people to not understand what I was talking about. So tonight I'm going to be playing a few clips that explain what I'm talking about, and hopefully that'll help you understand where I was going with that a little better. And I'm also going to play a few clips getting into what is the false ego and how we feed it, because you'll hear me reference the false ego often. And I'm going to play a little bit about the Law Society from his movie as well, because it's good for you guys to hear that. But my whole goal is to explain what I meant when I said that it is society's sickness. And sickness, I guess, maybe is a bad term, but I really don't have a better way of explaining it. And again, me sitting here trying to explain it myself without having Ben or Dr. Bruce Lipton to sit here and kind of roundtable with, it's a little more difficult unless you take the time to either go watch the movie, which I suggest you do. Go watch actually all three of his movies. Watch Esoteric Agenda, Cymatica, and then Ungrip in that order. That way you can kind of... because he made them kind of in an order so that they go that way. So I would watch them, the first one, Esoteric Agenda, go back and then watch Cymatica, which is what I'm going to play some clips from tonight, and then go watch Ungrip. It's important that I explain this stuff to you, because my whole goal for coming on air and talking about this stuff, like on Sunday when I did my Sunday show and I did the whole first hour about fear and everything else, and how we get through it, and it kind of I touched on, again, the false ego a little bit, and how we create this monster ourselves, and we need to understand the basics of it. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can get this across to you, if I can help you understand how we create this mess, then I also help you understand how we can fix it and make it better, right? So that's my goal tonight. Hopefully by the end of tonight's show, we will all be on the same page. If not, at least I can say I tried, right? And don't forget, make sure you tune in this Sunday, because I got a special show coming up with Steve Stars on the Lincoln assassination. The anniversary is coming up. And since the anniversary is going to coincide, it falls on the same day as the Titanic sinking. Steve and I are doing a 100-year anniversary special for the Titanic. So this Sunday, we are dedicating 2 hours to the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. And we already did a show and a special podcast last year about this. And actually, the podcast itself, which was kind of an addendum to the show, went super viral. It was the first account was on, which is now closed by YouTube. It went super, super viral. And even on subsequent accounts, it still gets on a couple other YouTube accounts, it gets at least 2 or 3 comments a day on at least 1 or 2 of the channels. So we're gonna go back and revisit what we talked about, and Steve's found out some interesting stuff since then. We're gonna get into the Titanic. Popeye, why would you talk about the Titanic? Well, there was some shadiness going on, and J.P. Morgan owned the liner. Need I say any more? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break. Stay tuned. When we get back, I will get into the false ego and more. Stay tuned. So what is the false ego? Well, the false ego would be what Satanists worship. You could call the false ego Lucifer if you'd like. Remember Mark Passio, when he's come on multiple times, we've talked about at a base level, Satanism is about worshiping oneself. Not meaning you look in the mirror and you get on your knees and you go, I love myself, I'm so awesome. Not like that. Although that could, narcissism is in that same vein. No, that's not what I'm talking about. What I mean is everything is about you and you only. So, I guess narcissism, yeah, you could look at it the same way, but I don't want to just say narcissism because then that's a label and that's not what I'm talking about. What I mean is, like, if you're driving down the road and you see an old lady and you're at a stoplight, right? And you're at a red light and you see an old lady crossing the street and you realize that she's only going to be about halfway across that walkway when the light turns green. I've had this happen where I've seen little old ladies caught in the crosswalk, light turns, and as they're still trying to cross, people in the lanes of traffic just start going. Nobody stops and waits for her. And God forbid somebody get out of their vehicle and help her. I've gotten out. My wife's seen me do it. I've hopped out in the middle of traffic. She's like, what are you doing? I'm going to go help the little old lady out. That's the kind of thing you're supposed to do. That's the kind of thing what you do when you're, humanity, when you're not losing your humanity. That's what that's what the physical manifestation of this problem, these elites, want. They want you to lose your humanity, right? So that's just an example of it. So, what is the false ego? What would be? How does that correlate to that example? Well, you not getting out and helping that little old lady, thinking about yourself. Well, I have things to do. I have to go get a cup of coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. I have to go to the post office. I this, I that. I. Just like Mark says about money, moan I. It's all about the worship of the self. And not about anything else. So at a base level, that's what Satanism is. Okay, it's about worshiping this false ego. It's about giving it power, right? So first things first, I have to go back a little bit and break things down a little bit at a basic level. So maybe as I get into a few other things, you guys can understand some of this. So let's get into what exactly, when it comes to, let's say, language and word magic, which you've heard Mark and I talk about as well. And we get into how that plays into with the false ego and everything else. So this is important to understand. So I'm going to play you a clip from Ben's movie called Cymatica, where he talks about what Cymatica itself is and what the study of cymatics is. So you can get a good a brief understanding of what it is. So here, let me bring that up for you really quick, and then we'll go from there. So let's start with understanding what is cymatica and cymatics, and how words and how audio or frequency can actually affect the human body and everything else around it. Let's start there, and then we'll continue.
In nature, all that we perceive with our 5 senses is a result of 2 fundamental principles. Everything in existence is made of a relationship between vibration and matter. Vibration is a masculine creative force countered by matter, which is a feminine receptive force. Thus begins the principle of duality. We see this duality in ancient myths and philosophies, yet only those philosophies and scriptures that were perverted and raped of the original meaning gave the impression that one polarity was good while the other was evil. The original sages, adepts, and shamans taught that both are necessary, and one would not exist without the other. These two important principles come together to form all things in the universe. This is cymatica. Even language, logos, the communication of any and all things in nature, depends upon this principle. Pete Peterson, in his works Cymatics, The Science of the Future, stated that nature shows examples of cymatica in everything. This phenomena is found to be one of the prime forces that moves biological evolution along its path. Dan Winter reproduced an experiment to prove that the ancient languages of Hebrew and Sanskrit, when spoken, create a vibratory frequency that moved matter into sacred geometrical patterns. Upon further investigation, Hebrew, Sanskrit, Aramaic, Arabic, and other elder dialects have older roots in a parent language of Gaelic and quite possibly an even earlier origin. In Swami Murugesu's The Science of Mantra, he claimed that when a person chanted specific words in Sanskrit while filming a burning candle, the intensity as well as the color of the flame would change due to the frequency that the word would emit. This same science has been shown to lower and raise blood pressure.
Which I have to stop it there. I can attest to. I have a tattoo of the Om prayer in Sanskrit, in the original Sanskrit. There's been different versions where it's tweaked for tattoos and this and that. No, I got the original Sanskrit, and I have it tattooed on me. And I can tell you there have been many a time when I needed to, quite like the litany against fear, where I recited this, the Om prayer, and it did very much help lower blood pressure and actually take away any anxiety I might have had. So you would be surprised the power of spoken word. But I digress.
And in his own words, certain sounds can affect their circulation and nervous system. Whatever change such vibrations cause extends to the mind of a person and also to the surrounding atmosphere, causing warmth or coolness. All this can be known by study and shown by practice. This rediscovered knowledge of the science of sound shows that sound is something more than mere vibratory signals. Not only does sound interact with life, but it sustains and develops it. It acts as a conduit of conscious intent between people, societies, and entire civilizations. Yet the psychic illness we endure due to the domination of our false ego is reflected in the collective. Our psychological schism has shut us off from communicating correctly with our inner self, which is exactly how cancer cells within the body operate. In the collective, we have created a language barrier between humanity and the rest of nature, acting as a global cancer. Recorded in history, the efficacy of the ancient languages has been severely uprooted. The alphanumeric translation from Hebrew to English shows a complete reversal of the two languages, giving the cymatic effect unnatural results. Dr. Leonard Horowitz stated in his work on DNA, 1/3 of the sensory motor cortex of the brain is devoted to the tongue, oral cavity, the lips, and speech. In other words, oral frequency emissions spoken or sung exert powerful control over life, vibrating genes that influence total well-being and even evolution of the species. A degradation of language in this case is shown to affect biology. If something as basic and important as language can be degraded and devalued to such a degree, yet never questioned, what else might we be missing? Think of an aspect of your life that dictates the limits of your freedom.
Now, I'm going to pause it there for a second. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about the power of spoken word. When people say, oh, speaking truth to power, that doesn't get you anywhere. Really? Really? Did you hear what was just said? Giving in like that is, again, giving in to the false ego, and we will learn more about that. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Do not go anywhere. We are back. So, now that I've explained a little bit, again, I urge you all to go do your own research, but now that I've explained a little bit about cymatics and what it is, and I've given you the base idea that the power of sound can have drastic effects, whether it be good or bad. And there's plenty of evidence for this, so I suggest you go look it up. Again, 2 hours is never enough time to explain all this. That's why I try to give you guys as much information without overloading you in a 2-hour time slot, but I ask you to go do your own research. Never, ever, ever take what I say to be gospel. Go do the research yourself, and then you'll see. I'm leading the horse to the water, but I cannot force the horse to drink. I have to let the horse drink the water itself in order for the horse to appreciate the water. Okay? So, anyway, getting back into it, I want to play this clip because it's rather long, but it's about the Law Society. Now, this is another aspect. Again, I showed you how words and language was somewhat perverted, and we'll get into that a little more. But now I want to show you about the Law Society. Because remember, this all is attached to the quote-unquote elites that lord over us. Because if we do something bad, we have to go to court. So I want you all to understand what the Law Society actually is. So here you go, ladies and gentlemen.
Government and law enforcement, insurance and pharmaceutical companies, taxes, building permits, driver's licenses, and more. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of stipulations, regulations, and boundaries on our freedom. And out of the ones that were just mentioned, how many have you researched to find out whether they apply to you or not? Let's look at the forms of law that we currently acquiesce to. A common misconception among people is that any rule or regulation that governs them falls under one category: law. But there are many other forms of law that people abide by without realizing that they simply do not apply to them. Another misconception is that a nation's constitution gives us our rights. A constitution does nothing more than list the rights that we already have. We are born with inalienable rights, endowed to us by our Creator. They are not given to us, and they cannot be given away. The most a person can do with a right is choose whether to exercise it or not. Maritime admiralty law is what's known as the law of the water. It is superseded by civil law and only applies to those who willingly contract themselves into it. The definition of admiralty law is a body of private international law governing the relationships between private entities which operate vessels on the oceans. Let's look at how and why a form of law that is fashioned to govern corporations, businesses, and vessels has imposed its rule over natural human beings. This is all done through a form of word magic. A simple perversion of language has made it possible to convince people around the world that these alternative laws apply to them. One of the predominant beliefs in modern culture is that licenses, permits, registrations, and other forms of documentation are required to operate motor vehicles, use public roads, build structures and establishments, engage in free enterprise, and much more. Sadly, these beliefs are based on little to no investigation whatsoever, and are false. This belief structure is perpetuated by maritime admiralty law. This form of law was originally created to govern ships docking in foreign nations for the import or export of products and resources. It deals with banking and merchant affairs, not civil affairs. When a product is taken off of a ship and brought into a foreign land, that nation takes custody of the resource and accounts for it with a certificate. That certificate marks the birth date of that product in the custody of the respective nation. Think of why it is supposedly required to have a certificate of live birth in the first place. The Barron's Dictionary of Banking Terms defines a certificate as a paper establishing an ownership claim. So right there, we notice that everyone with a birth certificate is defined as being owned. People are used as collateral with other nations because the U.S. is bankrupt. The United States declared bankruptcy on March 9th of 1933. At this point, the U.S. began taking out loans from a private, non-government affiliated corporation called the Federal Reserve. With no money to pay back the loans, the United States began using the citizens as collateral. All birth and marriage certificates are literally warehouse receipts. Just look at the similarities of warehouse receipts and birth certificates. Both document the date of issue, a serial number, registration number or receipt number, a description of the product, and an authorized informant to notify the appropriate government agency. With all of this information being readily available, the majority of people are unaware of their involvement with maritime admiralty law. This is possible through the manipulation of language. This admiralty law changed the meaning of the word person from a natural living person to a corporation. Driver's licenses, vehicle registrations, auto insurance forms, building permits, gun permits, work permits, tax filing documents, birth and death certificates, traffic citations, and many other forms of documentation that were once believed to be absolutely necessary only applied to persons or corporations. Upon signing such a legal document, you are indirectly waiving your rights under the Constitution and lowering your status to that of a corporation that is created with the same exact name as you. The only way to reconcile your true name from the name of the corporation is to take notice that the corporation has its name in all capital letters. This is known as capitis diminutia maxima. You may take notice that your driver's license, birth certificate, social security card, insurance cards, and more use all capital letters to legally represent the corporation with your name, not you. The corporation is known as an artificial person, whereas you, the human being, are known as a natural person. This deception goes even deeper when it comes to the courts that we attend. When showing up to court, you will notice that there are seats for witnesses behind a wooden fence or barrier. The defendant must cross through the entrance to the other side of the barrier where the plaintiff and judge sit. This act symbolizes the boarding of a ship. At this time, business can be conducted in maritime admiralty law. The judge, acting as captain or banker, is responsible for settling the balance between the two sides. This is why there is always a monetary value involved in any court case. The captain is simply dealing with banking and merchant disputes. Once the balance is paid, the case is closed. To turn the court case away from admiralty law where your rights are not protected, you must avoid agreeing to represent the artificial person. This is done by stating that you are the natural person. You don't have a first or last name because those imply corporate title. In a court case, you may state that the court takes judicial notice of your honor's oath of office. Every judge must take an oath of office to practice law. Yet you must make it clear to the court and the jury that the judge is acting as judge and not banker. Remember that you are a natural human being of the earth. You are not governed by anything but your own consciousness. Laws are created within a society. The society that created the laws we see being enforced today is called the Law Society. Yet the most beautiful part of this entire deception is the fact that we are not part of the Law Society, so their laws do not apply to us.
Judges, lawyers, and law enforcement officers, they're all part of a society. Within that society, they've created their own language that's deceptively similar to English. They have these little things called statutes, acts, and regulations that seem like laws, but they really only apply to those within their society. So that basically means all the traffic violations, minimum age requirements, and everything except for damage to another person or their property doesn't really apply to the natural person.
Laws only apply to those within the Law Society. The game being played is an illusion. You can simply choose to open your eyes and reclaim the freedom that you were born with.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's a little bit about the Law Society. I suggest you do further research on it. Buy yourself a copy of Black's Law Dictionary. Educate yourself about admiralty law. Go to my good friend Mark Passio's website, What on Earth is Happening. He's done podcasts about it. Go check it out. We will be right back. Stay tuned. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the false ego. now that I've shown you about the law of society, I wanted to get that out of the way because you have to understand. It's like the basics, it's like riding a bicycle. You have to try to get used to the bicycle. So they put the training wheels on, and your father teaches you how the basics of riding a bicycle. You have to pedal, hold handlebars, make sure you hit the brakes if you need it, look ahead, don't look down. Where you look is where you're going to go. So if you look down, you're going to crash. The basics. So I had to give you a little bit of information about cymatics and how sound can change things, okay? Physically, our bodies, our environment, right? Now, you understand that. Now you understand how a little bit about logos and about how words have been twisted and how the law, and I'm doing air quotes, isn't really what you think it is, and statutes and all this other limitations and stuff on your personal freedom. Now you understand all this stuff. Now I can, because that's going to, again, that plays into the fact that we have this quote unquote ruling elite over top of us that rule us, right? This ruling elite, right? It plays into that because we have to go to their court system and play by their rules, right? Their laws. You just found out that that's not really what you think it is. Now I want to get back into the whole false ego, so you understand a little bit about that. So let's get into the psyche, which is where the false ego is. That's where it lives. Our physical world is a manifestation of what goes on inside of our psyche. I know, I just hit the, slow down, Popeye. You just hit the warp drive button. What are you doing? Trust me, after you hear this clip, maybe this will clear it up a little bit for you. But remember, our physical world is a manifestation of what's going on inside of ourselves, inside of our psyche. That's where the term real change comes from within, that saying. That's where that comes from. They're talking about you have to change inside of yourself, your psyche.
Carl Jung discovered that there is a collective unconscious connected to all humans, meaning that the whole of humanity shares a single mind with one another. This is evident in the world through accounts of shared mythology and symbols, the study of morphic fields, and with the science of kinesiology. This collectivity is a global example of the unconscious mind of the human body, in which trillions of cells share a similar signal. This parasite, called our false ego, requires a continuous flow of sustenance to survive. Food, fuel, and any other form of sustenance is energy. Human consciousness is an electromagnetic field of energy. When this potential energy is utilized, it then releases kinetic energy, which is used to perpetuate the false ego. This scenario occurs in the smallest parasitic organisms, all the way to a collective organism called humanity. A parasite will release chemicals that cause the host to crave the sustenance that the parasite needs to survive. As long as the host is unaware, it will keep feeding the parasite and starving itself. In a similar way, Wilhelm Reich stated that whole societies suffer from a psychosis caused by starving our organic biological impulses. He states that sexual suppression supports the power of the church, which has sunk very deep roots into the exploited masses by means of sexual anxiety and guilt. It engenders timidity towards authority and binds children to their parents. This results in adult subservience to state authority and to capitalistic exploitation. It paralyzes the intellectual critical powers of the oppressed masses because it consumes the greater part of biological energy. Finally, it paralyzes the resolute development of creative forces and renders impossible the achievement of all aspirations for human freedom. In this way, the prevailing economic system, in which single individuals can easily rule entire masses, becomes rooted in the psychic structures of the oppressed themselves. What Reich was showing in this powerful quote is that on a collective level, the suppression of a natural function, whether biological, spiritual, or emotional, will result in an abnormal reaction, a psychic disease. This illness or disease is reflected into the masses through a collective unconscious and acts as an epidemic. Humanity is plagued with an incapacity for freedom. meaning that people en masse lack the ability to govern themselves on a psychic level, and this manifests in the macrocosm as government and organized religious powers, thus opening the throne, our national and individual throne, to anyone and anything. Enter the infamous rulers of the earth, the patriarchs of civilization, political, social, economic, and spiritual dictatorship, psychic tyranny. This simple illness within our psyche, this lack of responsibility and neglect of basic human freedom, has made way for every tyrant that has ever held rule over people on this planet.
And there's a quote here where I pause it. I want to read it to you. So it's going to take me a second because it's rather large. Mankind is caught in the cycle of fear, apathy, and hatred. These human instincts drive hierarchical political systems and bureaucracies that most often limit the basic human right of the pursuit of happiness. That's pretty powerful. Think about that. Listen to that again. Mankind is caught in the cycle of fear, apathy, and hatred. That sounds like what's going on in this country right now, does it not? There's this base level of fear that the government keeps putting out. You got to be afraid. The boogeyman's in your closet. He's under the bed. He's in your bathroom cabinet. He's going to come out of your vanity and bite your ass off, right? Boogeyman, ooh, Al-Qaeda, terrorism, bah, homegrown terror, fear, right? Then there's apathy. Oh, I really don't care. You know, politics sucks. I don't like politics. I prefer to watch Dancing with the Stars. And, you know, who cares? Because both sides suck anyway, and voting gets you nowhere, and I'm tired of voting for the loser. Apathy. And then hatred. Oh, you people that don't believe in man-made global warming, you people are crazy. We should annihilate you from the planet because you are a scourge. Or hatred in the way of bigotry or any other form of hatred. Listen to the rest of the quote. These human instincts drive hierarchical political systems and bureaucracies that most often limit the basic human right of the pursuit of happiness. Again, the human instincts of fear, apathy, and hatred, they drive hierarchical political systems, meaning that is what feeds and drives our political systems that we have today. This machine that puts out fear constantly, DHS and the rest of it. These human instincts drive hierarchical political systems and bureaucracies that most often limit the basic human right of the pursuit of happiness. Well, if that isn't what's happening today, then I don't know what is. So this stuff is the real deal and serious, ladies and gentlemen. A society whose foundation is fear, apathy, and hatred sets up a system which fundamentally affects the happiness of the individual. I will repeat that again. A society whose foundation is fear, apathy, and hatred sets up a system which fundamentally affects the happiness of the individual. Do you think anybody in this country is really happy? Does the attitude in this country reflect the mood of happiness? I don't believe so. I really don't believe so at all. I'll read it one more time for you. A society whose foundation is fear, apathy, and hatred sets up a system which fundamentally affects the happiness of the individual. And that is what's going on. Through cymatics, through the words, through fear. I mean, look at how apathetic and full of fear everybody in this country is. People could care less about politics. I don't care about Ron Paul. I don't care about this politician. I don't care about this. I don't care about that. All politicians suck. I'm afraid the terrorists are going to come get me. And they have hatred for somebody, for some reason, one reason or another. So again, one more time, a society, our society today, our current society, whose foundation is fear, apathy, and hatred, sets up a system which fundamentally affects the happiness of the individual. Is that radiating into your head yet, ladies and gentlemen? Am I making any sense to you? I'll repeat it one more time. A society whose foundation is fear, apathy, and hatred sets up a system which fundamentally affects the happiness of the individual. Think about that while we go to break. Ladies and gentlemen, when we come back, hour number 2, more on the false ego, I promise. By the end of tonight's show, you will be familiar with the false ego, and hopefully I will give you the tools to stand up and take back control of things. So stay tuned. We'll be back with hour number 2. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com. We've been talking about the false ego. We're getting into how the false ego, well, I've gotten into in the past, especially with Mark on different shows, how the false ego dominates things, and we've covered it a little bit, but both of us have always said, go watch the movie Cymatica. I know many people are busy, so my job as radio show host is to bring the knowledge to you, and I love to do it, so I have no problem with taking time out of my show and donating it so I can play certain parts of this movie for you so you guys can hear certain things. This in no way fills in for sitting down and watching the thing with an open mind and in its entirety. And you don't have to believe everything. If you don't want to believe everything in there, I'm not forcing you to believe anything because it wouldn't do anything. It's not going to help you. All I ask is that you sit and watch the movie with an open mind and perhaps take some notes and do some investigation. And you'll see that there's a lot of accurate, factual information in the movie, and that Ben is not just blowing smoke up your collective asses. Okay. I want to repeat this whole quote because there's 3 pieces to it. And I only read you 2 parts, but it's huge, this quote. So it's so big, he had to do it in 3 pieces in the movie. So I'm going to read it, and I'm going to let the music play, but I'm going to read it as it comes down. In fact, what I'll do is I will mute up the audio, and I'm going to read it as it scrolls across the screen to you guys so you can hear the entire quote in its entirety. Okay, so listen. This is about, again, getting into with the false ego and how this is the fear aspect of it. Because if you remember the first hour, the clip was talking about Ben was getting into how this parasite, this false ego, it needs us to live. And in order for it to continue to thrive, it needs to thrive on our consciousness. And the only way it can continue to do that is if it gets us to believe that we need it and we require it. And how it does that is through chemicals like fear, the emotional response. Remember, emotions, hormones, it's all connected. Okay, here's the clip, or here's the quote. Mankind is caught in the cycle of fear, apathy, and hatred. These human instincts drive hierarchical political systems and bureaucracies that most often limit the basic human right of the pursuit of happiness. A society whose foundation is fear, apathy, and hatred sets up a system. Oh, went too fast. Hold on, let me rewind. Let me fix it here, guys. Of course, leave it to Windows Media Player to crash on me while I'm trying to read you guys this final quote here before I get back into the false ego. Typical Windows crap. But let me just See if I can get it back up here for a second for you guys. I want to read this to you guys again because it's really important that you guys see this. Again, this society that we live in, this false ego represses true freedom, the pursuit of true happiness, which is what does it say in the Constitution? The pursuit of happiness. So how is this all connected? Again, the false ego, this, let's call it the New World Order, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them. They're a physical manifestation of this false ego, right? They need you to be afraid. They need you to fear. So they pump out stuff like Al-Qaeda is going to come get you and they're going to come bite you, or homegrown terrorism, or if you say, they get the cops to, everybody's out to get you except other cops. If they say they're sovereign citizens, it means they're cop killers. That's how they use fear to control people. You can get into semantics of, again, they use the sovereigns with the cops, or these people with these people, and blah, 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 blah. So you get the picture. Okay, so here's the quote. Mankind is caught in the cycle of fear, apathy, and hatred. These human instincts drive hierarchical political systems and bureaucracies that most often limit the basic human right of the pursuit of happiness. A society whose foundation is fear, apathy, and hatred sets up a system which fundamentally affects the happiness of the individual. It represses individual development and maintains a cyclical behavioral pattern of superiority and inferiority and a class society founded on untrue ideals. I'm going to read this last part again because just like the first two parts in the last segment, I want to beat this into your heads over the airwaves. It represses individual development, meaning the false ego. It represses individual development and maintains a cyclical behavioral pattern of superiority and inferiority and a class society founded on untrue ideals. So if our society is founded on apathy, hatred, and fear, then individual development is going to be repressed. And a cyclical behavioral pattern of superiority and inferiority is going to be maintained, and it's going to keep happening. The quote-unquote vicious cycle your mom warned you about when you were a kid. Oh, it's just a vicious cycle. Or your dad or whoever, I'm sure you heard that comment once in your life. Oh, it's a vicious cycle. I'll repeat it again. A cyclical behavioral pattern of superiority and inferiority. Oh, rule us. We can't protect ourselves. We need you. Save us. The President of the United States. You're a hero. Oh, Obama, you have a cape. Oh, Superman. Oh, save us. You yourself said you're from Krypton. Please. A cyclical behavioral pattern of superiority and inferiority and a class society founded on untrue ideals. It represses individual development and maintains a cyclical behavioral pattern of superiority and inferiority and a class society founded on untrue ideals. A class society founded on untrue ideals. If that doesn't describe society today, I don't know what does. A class society founded on untrue ideals. Why do you think people are so walking around like they're zombies? They have their heads up their asses. They don't know anything. Everybody's in a daze. Everybody, I don't know where to go. I feel depressed. I need pills. I need to smoke pot. I need to drink alcohol. I need to do this. I need to do that. I'm just trying to find myself. I don't know what to do. It's because we are living in this society founded on untrue ideals. We are living the exact antithesis of how we should be. And on an inner level, we are feeling it in your soul, if that's what you want to call it. Your essence, Your very being can feel that something is wrong. Everything is screaming something is wrong. That's what happens when you live in fear and you live filled with hatred and you're apathetic about everything. Does that quote not shake you to the core, ladies and gentlemen? Does that not show you the very basis of things? Does that not show you how they control with fear? Does that not show you the basis of our reality right now and why we need to change things up? All right, we'll be back. More with the false ego. We'll get into self. Come back. I know. Strap in, ladies and gentlemen. It's a deep ride down the rabbit hole tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. All right, I want to get back right into it because time is of the essence. And I still have a bunch of stuff I want you to hear. So I want to finish up with the false ego. Remember, I was telling you, it requires us to feed it. Right? They need, as a physical manifestation of that, it would be the DHS telling you, be afraid of the boogeyman that could possibly be in your closet. We're the only people that could protect you from it. Okay? There's a physical manifestation of that. So let's get back into it.
These oppressive tyrants that are demonized by the masses are no different than us. In fact, they are one with us. In the book The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, he poetically states, I say, as the holy and the righteous cannot rise beyond the highest which is in each of you, so the wicked and the weak cannot fall lower than the lowest which is in you also. Every one of us has the capability to commit the most horrifying sin or show the most beautiful compassion to our fellow man. This is the very definition of an illness within the psyche and soul of man.
Here's another quote I want to read for you. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places.
Think of any position of power that you believe to be above you. Royal families, government leaders, the United Nations, financial organizations, corporate monopolies, and media juggernauts. These are all facets of our false ego. They are the physical advent of our own sickness. They require our conscious participation, our conscious energy to survive. Because without our cooperation, without supplying them with the sustenance of complicity, they starve. Their very nature depends on our desire to be ruled. And a typical symptom of the illness among humanity today is our continuous denial of our illness. Repression. We consistently repress those qualities we choose not to accept about ourselves. This is why it is so difficult to see the false ego and its multiple manifestations for what they truly are.
A nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within.
This is the very nature of the false ego. It acts as a red herring to distract us from the freedom we truly have. For this psychic parasite to survive, it must supply us with a chemical that will cause us to remain dependent upon it. In this case, the sustenance is our conscious energy. And in order for us to feed it to the parasite, the chemical of fear causes humanity to crave protection and defense.
The functions of the body to survive can be broken down to two basic functions for any organism to survive.
This is Dr. Bruce Lipton.
you have to be able to grow, maintain yourself, take care of your biology, but you also must be able to protect yourself. So that if you're just growing and you can't protect yourself, you'll become food for something else. So the survival involves a balance between growth and protection. Through the history of human civilization and through a human evolution, we recognize that our nature is to be in a state of growth, and that our protection is only supposed to be used to, help us out of that threatening moment. You can't be in growth and in protection at the same time. So the significance is, when we see a need of protection, the stress hormones in the body shut off the blood vessels in our viscera or gut, which is the part of the body for growth. Well, the issue is, if you took the blood from the viscera and moved it out to the arms, then you left no blood in the viscera. That means no growth, but you're ready to fight. And when your fighting is finished, then the blood returns back to the viscera and you grow again. But in the world that we live in today, it's 24/7 fear. So we have a continuous dripping of that stress hormone into the body. It's just dripping all the time, getting us ready to run or fight or flight at any moment at the drop of a hat. We're ready to go because we're on guard. Well, the problem is, what does that mean about your allocation of energy? And it says, we're spending most of our energy in protection. You cannot survive if you're in protection all the time.
Which we are in protection all the time.
And if the parasite can control the nature of the fear, it can then create a fear among us that only it can defend us against. A recent physical manifestation of this comes from Zbigniew Brzezinski, former Secretary of State who also supported President Barack Obama. In his book, The Grand Chessboard, he states, as America becomes an increasingly multicultural society, it may find it more difficult to fashion a consensus of foreign policy issues, except in the circumstance of a truly massive and widely perceived direct external threat. Even the Reichsfuhrer of the Nazi Party, Hermann Göring, sums up this game of supply and demand perfectly when he stated, "The people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the peacemakers for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in any country. It also works the same in every individual psyche. Just remember that the false ego has only one desire, to become greater and more powerful than the true self. This illness causes us to believe that we are separate from nature. This is why we see such a rise in the dependency of technology. This is why we see such little stewardship for the earth and the environment. And this is why we see bigotry, racism, sexism, and every other form of discrimination possible that leads to crime, violence, wars, and eventually, the global destruction of the organism. This endless state of fear, confusion, and segregation our world seems to live in is a symptom of the false ego creating a false threat.
You understand, ladies and gentlemen? The false ego, the physical manifestation of it being our government. Do you understand now when I say, and when I've said in the past, that in order for us to expect there to be a change inside of Washington, as it were, or in this country, we each as individuals must change and understand the reality of things. We are all, as humans, cells of the body of this planet. And you can, you'll watch, when you see the full-length movie, Ben gets into how the planet is actually a living organism, as is the rest of this universe, and everything is a part of the bigger organism. And if you look at this planet like that, you understand that. then you will understand that at a base level, you cannot expect things to change. You can bitch and moan about it. You can get up, cry, throw things, scream and yell. Nothing is going to change until you understand the nature of the false ego and you understand how to change it from within. Because from within, the change will be projected outward. And then, and only then, will you see real change. Stay tuned. We're going to break. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Time is limited. I got 2 segments left to get through what I want to get through, so let's get down to it. I've talked to you about the false ego tonight. I've gone into it in detail somewhat. Now let's get into self. Again, getting into what I was just talking about at the last segment and explaining a little bit about the planets being alive and their circadian rhythm and how we are connected with it and how we are all part of a larger organism and how there are certain things that are involved. Rather than me muddle it up, let me play the clip.
During the 1990s, 3 Nobel laureates in medicine advanced research that revealed the primary function of DNA lies not in protein synthesis as widely believed for the past century, but in electromagnetic energy reception and transmission. Less than 3% of DNA's function involves protein manufacture. More than 90% functions in the realm of bioacoustic and bioelectric signaling.
Remember what I said about your DNA, the helix being an antenna, both sending and receiving?
So why is it important to know that DNA functions in bioelectric signaling? HeartMath Institute has discovered the heart and brain maintain a continuous 2-way dialogue, each influencing the other's functioning. Although it is not well known, the heart sends far more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart, and the signals the heart sends to the brain can influence perception, emotional processing, and higher cognitive functions. The heart also generates the strongest rhythmic electromagnetic field in the body, and this actually can be measured in the brainwaves of people around us. We are quite literally an electromagnetic expression of our highest cognitive function. The behavior of electromagnetism is evident throughout the world as dualism. All matter contains a negative and positive charge, which means organisms are built upon this foundation. The natural homeostasis of any organism is a balance of both polarities. Furthermore, research on emotional energetics shows that the heart's field is a carrier of emotional information and a mediator of bioelectromagnetic communication within and outside the body. Research shows our heart's field changes distinctly as we experience different emotions. It is registered in people's brains around us and apparently is capable of affecting cells, water, and DNA studied in vitro. Fear. The chemical supplied by a collective parasite creates a distinct bioelectric signal given off by the host. This signal is disseminated to the organisms within our community and will grow outward through the entire organism unless it is counterbalanced by an opposing force. Dr. Fritz Alan Popp discovered that the cells in our body communicate through biophotons, which are tiny particles of light that are single units of an electromagnetic field. This communication system within our body also exists between people in what's known as morphic resonance. This was known by the shamans, sages, and adepts of antiquity. These teachings were commonplace in prehistoric cultures. It wasn't by sheer chance that artistic expression and rituals were the cornerstone of every ancient civilization. Art was used as a personal method to exercise the shadow content of the psyche and introduce it to the conscious mind. This was very literally viewed as psychic therapy. Ritual was based around astrological dates. As we've learned, the study of the stars and planets reflect our own astropsychology. The shamans would perform rituals on astrological dates that would correlate with a circadian rhythm or a psychological cycle. These rituals kept the human participants aware of their inner self and prevented the repression of psychological content. As long as people were facing their inner demons and accepting them as their own, they were not collectively projecting them into the physical world. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. The progeny of our psychological disease began growing rapidly after a series of catastrophes forced the collective into a somatic state of fight or flight. This lowered the immunity of the population by introducing a state of immense stress. Our body becomes more susceptible to illness under stress. In this manner, humanity fell ill when entire bodies of land were swallowed up by the floodwaters. This uprooted many tribes, chiefdoms, and civilizations from their homes, and their ritual practices that were used as a conduit for psychic wellness were put on hold in order to survive the catastrophe and seek new homes. The shamans were spread to many new areas of the world. This information has been suppressed. We are made to believe that advanced civilizations such as ancient Egypt and the Mayans of Mesoamerica came about with no prior rudimentary remnants or evidence of evolving intellectual artifacts to bring them to their peak. We are meant to believe that their incredible knowledge of mathematics, astrology, agriculture, economy, polity, and architecture came out of nowhere. This leads many researchers today to the understanding that the origins of these civilizations have been suppressed. Not surprisingly, the force that has guided the suppression of this knowledge comes from the exact bloodline of the political and religious leaders stated previously. These are some of the notable book burnings and suppression of important texts in our history.
It reads through a ton of books.
There are still remnants of the dispersion of elder civilizations in nearly every country. There is tremendous evidence of ancient cultures visiting North America long before the conventional belief of European colonization.
Wait, you mean Christopher Columbus wasn't the first guy here? What?
Barry Fell states in his book, America BC, there are ancient inscriptions now being reported from nearly all parts of the United States, Canada, and Latin America, written in various European and Mediterranean languages in alphabets that date from 2,500 years ago. William Commonus Beaumont wrote, "The Toltec and Maya civilizations never originated on American soil, but appeared there full-blown, with a well-defined art and system of hieroglyphic writing which possesses affinities with Egyptian. It is found that there are thousands of prehistoric sites across New England and several other northern states showing inscriptions, carvings, and mounds created by Druidic mariners as far back as 800 BC. To suppress this information further, it was not only imperative for the bloodline to burn the documented texts containing true historical information, but to wipe out the cultures that derived from these ancient shamans. The most devastating genocide ever endured was and still is the annihilation of shamanic tribes.
We've lost our traditional roots and don't know about ritual. The dragon dances and the ghost dances of the Native American Indians, what do you think that was all about? All the shamans of the world, when they do their rituals, they're doing that. Their work, harmonically through dances, is to strengthen the immune system of the earth. You know, but they've been all murdered.
Michael Tsarion, by the way, in case you're interested. My friend Bob Tuskin has interviewed him multiple times. You should listen to the interview. Great interview last time Michael Tsarion was on with him. Great interview. Go check it out. Very interesting individual.
So that was why in the 17th century, exactly the same period I'm talking about, there was an all-out agenda that when you come across indigenous people, you annihilate them.
Columbus was sent on his expedition along with agents of the crown to disrupt the lives of the natives and seize mineral resources. He visited every island in the Caribbean, depleting the gold and taking as many slaves of the native Taino tribe as possible. 5 million natives were murdered within 3 years, according to Leah Trabeck. Within 15 years, the Arawak tribe of 250,000 was completely wiped out. The population of the United States prior to European contact was greater than 12 million. 4 centuries later, the count was reduced by 95% to 237,000. From 1494 to 1508, over 3 million people had perished from war, slavery, and the mines. Who in future generations will believe this? I myself, writing this as a knowledgeable eyewitness, can hardly believe it. My eyes have seen these acts so foreign to human nature, and now I tremble as I write. Another agent of the false ego bloodline was Hernando Cortez, who decimated the Aztec tribe and plundered their mineral resources.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break. Stay tuned. Final segment coming up. Do not go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, time is of the essence with the final segment here, so let's get right back into it.
As his second cousin, Francisco Pizarro, who conquered the Incan Empire in Peru. These atrocities are seen throughout Africa, New Zealand, New Guinea, East Timor, and are still seen today in Canada. This was a deliberate attempt to bury any surviving remnants of the ancient world and our true history. It is a naive mistake, however, to categorize and blame everything and everyone involved with politics or religion for this suppression of knowledge. It is only natural for people to crave spiritual understanding when there are so many manufactured missing links and perversions in the spiritual text today. And due to this void of spiritual wisdom, honest and moral people who are simply trying to understand their place in this world become the prime consumer market for those who wish to exploit this vulnerability.
The ego is something that is, it's insecure. It's something that is in need of control. The ego actually is an inferior thing, but it's trying to act like it is something that is superior. Hence this schism occurs between the ego and between the unconscious or the self. There's a kind of a messiah complex at work here as well, I feel, that we project the savior type ideal on someone, and we expect them to save us, and we're not willing ourselves to kind of deal with this and get to the root of why we perhaps feel insecure, or why we feel we don't have enough power to run our own lives, basically. If we look at the New Age movement, for instance, which is another kind of trap in all of this, where people might end up, actually. They're looking for something so bad that they're taking all these things that are handed to us or to them. But it's not really based on any real understanding. It's still kind of coming from a religious type of perspective. People are genuinely seeking something new. They're genuinely seeking a new type of spirituality, or to better themselves, or to change something. But this is being hijacked. And what they actually do is that they lead you into another type of group mentality or new age religion, whatever it is. And people still are not able to kind of really break free from that and follow their own journey or their own path, which I think is very important in all of this.
Each of us is something of a schizophrenic personality, tragically divided against ourselves. I'll read that again, and then I'll tell you who it's by. Each of us is something of a schizophrenic personality, tragically divided against ourselves. Martin Luther King Jr.
In the pre-Christian era, there were several cults of incredible power, most notably the stellar, solar, Saturnian, lunar, and mushroom cults. It is simple to see that worshippers of the lunar goddess comprised of the lunar cult. The worship of sun gods were indicative of the solar cults. The Saturnian cult, which consisted of Phoenicians and Canaanites, worshipped El or Eli. The biblical exodus of the Hebrews from Egypt showed that they entered Canaan and merged the lunar cult of Isis, the solar cult of Ra, and the Saturnian cult of El to form Isis, Ra, El, Israel. The old Israelitish cult and mythology, the Yahweh worship, the patriarchal legends, the sojourn in Egypt, and so on, are rooted in the religion of the sacred fungus, developed from the underlying fertility philosophy of the ancient Near East. The Jewish mitre, Muslim turbans, and military berets are derivations of the symbol of the mushroom cult. One of the first and most prominent, however, was the stellar cult, and a number of these ancient cults were created for shamanic purposes and earthly stewardship, yet some were taken over with different intentions. Just as you would imagine in any establishment of power, smaller cults formed within the main cults to worship individual deities. The cult of Mithras and the cult of Dionysus are two examples. You still today can see the Mithraic or Phrygian cap on the symbol of the seated Liberty Dollar, the coat of arms of many countries, the reverse side of the flag of Paraguay, the seal of the United States Senate, and even involved in the solar cult holiday that we now call Christmas. In the cult of Dionysus,
Santa's red cap is the Phrygian cap he's talking about.
Many festivals were celebrated, such as the Greater Dionysia, celebrated in Athens around the spring equinox. The foremost event in this festival was the Thymelic contest, in which poets, musicians, and entertainers performed in an open-air theater. Musicians did not have to pay taxes, and members of the Artists Guild did not have to participate in military affairs. The cult of Dionysus is still alive to this day as the entertainment industry.
Friedrich Nietzsche. The Christian Church is an encyclopedia of prehistoric cults. So I'll end it there because we only have a few minutes left. I just thought you'd find that last part interesting where it went into the ancient cults, and it gets a little bit deeper. But that's where a lot of this quote-unquote hierarchical structure comes from back in the day, and a lot of their beliefs, the Illuminati, and a lot of modern-day religions that we have today that we kill each other over for, which is completely retarded considering everything comes from the same place. Duh. So killing each other over, my God's better than your God, is kind of a moot point, and it's really stupid, and it's dumb. Followed by the equally dumb shit of killing each other over a piece of land. That's even dumber. I hope I've taught you guys a little bit about the false ego tonight, because by understanding a little better, hopefully we can fix what's going on in this country, in the world, everything. And I often go back to the basics and talk about the false ego, and I never really get a chance to get too in-depth into it, and I always get sidetracked. I might touch on it if Mark is on with me, Mark Passio, but we never really get too deep into it. And next time I have Mark on, we might get into it. I might just do a special podcast with him about it too. Who knows? I have a few other things that him and I want to work on. So, we'll see. But the point is, tonight I was able to give enough time to go over this somewhat in depth with you guys. And I'm glad I was, because it's important that you guys understand what I mean when I say that, because there's so much info that comes forward on all these alternative media show outlets and all these different shows here, even just on Orion itself. And you'll hear me if I'm a guest on Joe's show, excuse me, or someone else's show, and you'll hear me talking about things like the false ego, and you'll hear me talking about the police state and everything else, and you'll hear how I try to wrap it all in a nutshell in 20, 30 minutes without taking over, too much time up on their show, if that's what we're talking about. Or we might get into it on mine, but that's really never enough. So I hope after tonight you guys have been exposed to the false ego. You'll understand a little more when I refer to it in future shows. And if you go back and listen to my older archives for the newer listeners that haven't heard the older shows, and you'll be able to understand with a better perspective of what I mean when I say certain things. And I use that as I say, if we're talking about the New World Order, and I say, well, blah, 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 it's representative of the false ego, blah, 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 blah. You'll understand now what I mean a little better. I urge you to go check Ben's movie out, Cymatica. Again, his other movie, Ungrip. His first movie, Esoteric Agenda. All of them available. Go to federaljack.com, my website, and go to the Truth Movie section. Again, anybody out there, take my shows from DTRH Radio Archives, DTRH Radio Archives, all one word, YouTube channel where all the archives are. Or go through my archive channel, just click each link, and it'll load it up on the respective YouTube channel that episode happens to be on. But the archive channel is the eventual destination of every show, and that's where all the newer stuff is. Cut my shows up into little clips and throw them up on YouTube. Title it something, whatever, and spread them. And if you do it, send me the link, and I'll put it on social media. I'll post it around, whatever. Even if it's like a 5-minute rant or whatever, just do it. Spread the message so that people are more exposed to it. Do it not only with my show, do it with Joe Joseph's, do it with Bob Tuskin's, do it with all the alternative media. I'm calling on everybody to step up to the plate. I'm calling on all the other alternative media outlets out there to come together. We all have to join forces. Either we stand together or we're going to hang separately. And I've already got a few things in the works behind the scenes. But we all need to get up and get involved in one way or another. We need to back each other up. We need to take care of each other. Go out there and cut up, listeners, go out there and cut up the host shows, spread them, spread links. And if you guys I told you, I've already said this, if you make a really cool video advertising federaljack.com and my show, Down the Rabbit Hole, and you throw it up on YouTube, and you come up with a really cool video for advertising the show and my website, I'll hook you up with a free federaljack.com t-shirt. Go to FedJack, our fan page on Facebook, to see what the t-shirts look like. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm out of time tonight. As always, it is an honor to sit here for 2 hours with you. Make sure to tune in Sunday for me and my buddy Steve Stars on the Lincoln assassination. I'm out.